it's interesting with journalism, like people on the spectrum, I think pretty widely have a very high level of curiosity about stuff, but there's also the social skills issue. So it's like you'd think that might not be the best match.
When I told my parents that I wanted to maybe be a reporter, because I saw the people on television I saw growing up, I was like, man, I could do that too, possibly. They were really concerned because yes, journalism, you have to have a lot of social skills with it. And I wasn't that good at them for a long time.
Welcome back to the Sign of Good Health podcast. Today I'm with a coworker and friend of mine, Alex Jirgens. So we're going to talk about his experience with autism and how it's kind of affected different aspects of his life. So Alex, you want to start with just introducing yourself?
Well, thank you, Alex. Yes, my name is Alex Jirgens, like you said, and work with them at a TV station in southern Minnesota / northern Iowa. We cover both states, and I'm an MMJ, multimedia journalist. I'm the one, I guess, out in the trenches every day, for lack of a better term, doing interviews, conducting interviews with people. And let me get this little app notification out of the way. Thank you. And put on great stories and hopefully, help balance time out for the producers here. So,
Yep. Yeah, and he brings, he's great live. He does a great job. So we'll get to
thank you.
We'll get to the career stuff a little later and let you toot your horn. But
sure.
Let's start with, tell me about your experience with autism, like growing up. Like, when were you diagnosed?
I'd tell you, that's a great question. And it's something that for a long time, I guess I wasn't open about until very recently. But I guess from what I know, from what I've heard from my mother, who kind of paid attention a lot, not saying my dad didn't, but from what she remembers the most, I think vividly more than my dad does. I was 5 years old when I was officially diagnosed with Aspergers technically, but even the Aspergers terminology has kind of fallen out of favor. They don't use it, I think, in the latest.
DSM-5.
Yep. I was gonna say, you know more about that stuff than I do, but I wish I knew more. But I had a para in this kindergarten class I was in a kind of a rural school district in southeast Kansas, and she noticed I wasn't really interacting with the other students. I was by myself a lot. I would talk to myself a lot, and I think she just told me this recently. We were on some sort of field trip, and I think we were some sort of fishery or fish hatchery or something like that. And I started rattling off facts about this particular kind of fish, and it just came out of nowhere. And so then the para suggested to my parents, and my dad was a high school history teacher at the time. Actually, he was just a few years into his teaching career. My mother, she didn't have a full-time job yet, but she was kind of doing some odd jobs here and there, para and that sort of thing too, a substitute teacher as well. She's like, well, maybe you should have your son checked out up at KU Med, at the University of Kansas Medical School there in Kansas City, because we lived an hour away from there at the time. And so they took me up there, was diagnosed, and they were trying to figure out, how is this possible? Because we don't have anybody. I mean, we have some people we kind of suspect in our family, in both my dad and my mother's sides of the family, that may have it, but they've never been officially diagnosed with it. So we don't know. Maybe it was something in the air in 1992. I don't know. It's one of life's greatest mysteries. It's hard to tell. And going through my elementary, my primary school years, it was difficult. I mean, I talk with people, I interact with people, but like many with Asperger's or autism, it's very difficult socially. I didn't have a lot of friends. I, again, talked to myself a lot. I had these different kind of fixations on certain things. Like, first, it started off with maps, and there's a whole tangent I can get into about that later. But then it grew into music, radio stations, call letters, and branding and stuff, and then television. And then it kind of harnessed that into journalism somehow, thanks to a family member of mine that kind of gave me the idea. And I mean, that's kind of how I got into journalism, but that's probably the next question further down, I guess.
Sure. So You mentioned you had a para in kindergarten. Like, were you having some kind of struggles ahead of the diagnosis? I mean, well, you kind of touched on that, but
I think she was already in the classroom prior to that. I think she was a student teacher actually at the time. I don't know I don't even know if she's still teaching now. And to be honest, I forgot her name, unfortunately. If I had my yearbook from 1999, I could definitely point that out. But yeah, 1999, that's 20 years ago now. Gosh, I feel old. But she was already in the classroom. I think she was trying to learn. I think she was specializing in behavioral science and that kind of thing. And I think her background was,
you just kind of triggered her radar, so to speak.
Yeah. I think she was learning about like autism and learning disabilities and stuff. And we didn't have anybody in my kindergarten class. I remember we didn't have anybody with Down syndrome, but I think it was just, she was trying to learn how kids interact with each other and that kind of thing. And her radar sense went off, and that's how she spotted me.
Sure. So you mentioned your mom like paid attention. So like, how did your family handle the diagnosis?
I think at first they were pretty confused. They didn't know what it really was. I mean, my dad in his short time teaching, I don't think he ever had a student with autism at all. So it was a wake up call because they didn't know what it meant. And for a long time they even felt that could I potentially live on my own and live a successful life. When we moved to a different town in a different school district after my kindergarten year, first grade onwards, went to a district in central Kansas, and he still continues his teaching career. There are more resources and everything too. And there's a place there called Disability Supports. And it's kind of a group home for people who have mental disability, like Down syndrome, for example, or, very low functioning autism. It's kind of run the gamut, I guess. And they were concerned that maybe I'd move into that type of facility because at a young age, I wasn't acting like the other kids. Again, the social skills were terrible. There are some learning skills I had. I mean, I know everyone has like a strong suit of a particular subject. Mine was social science and history, thanks in part to my dad. But when it came to like math, certain types of science, so I was drawing a blank, and that's how I got a para, because I had an IEP in school all through, even up to my senior year of high school. I had one. College was a different story, but that IEP, helped me kind of guide to where I needed to be, benchmark wise in terms of my progression. And, and I didn't have to be held back a grade. I mean, I went through it like everyone else and graduated in 2011 with the high school diploma. So, but they understood more about it over time, and they became pretty good experts at it, I'd say.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you struggled socially. I know when I was going through school, like after school activities kind of helped me make friends. Like, did you have any way to kind of turn some of the interests into more socializing and that kind of stuff?
Well, there was at our YMCA there, they had an after school program I did for a bit, and I didn't really fit in with that. My dad encouraged me to do like Boy Scouts and stuff, but I was never interested in that. I guess really a couple of things really. Yeah, well, a couple of things. I'd say joining the cross country team that I did for 3 years in high school, and also Quiz Bowl or Scholars Bowl, what we called it. Mm-hmm. And I did that all 4 years. And it's like a Quiz Bowl type tournament that many schools have, kind of like in the style of Jeopardy, if you will. That helped me develop friends. And actually, too, I had a bully growing up, and that kind of deterred me really, and it maybe kind of scared me into formalizing friendships and making friends and socializing. And then sophomore year of high school, something clicked in my head. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let this guy define my life or try to ruin my life anymore. I'm going to get out, stand up for myself, get out there, make friends, and it really changed. And high school, it changed mostly because my dad was a teacher there too. So a lot of my classmates had him as a teacher. So they really had to respect me. They had no choice, because otherwise they would have heard about it. But not that anything happened. That was a good sign. But I'd say probably cross country and Quiz Bowl, I think, kind of helped me established friendships, and many of whom I still stay in or try to stay in contact with today.
For high school, with that, you said you went to college. So like, how did you go about figuring out what you want to do with college?
Well, I've had some ideas of kind of what I wanted to do in college. Before I graduated from high school, talked about getting into radio mostly, and eventually it worked itself into journalism. That's kind of further down a little bit, but it would show itself more later. And I've also looked at maybe joining a company like Garmin and being maybe like a GPS technician. And after I graduated in 2011, I went to community college for a couple of years just to get the basics out of the way, save some money. And then I took a couple of years off and just worked. I wanted to make sure I wanted to do exactly what it is I wanted to do and not have to change majors multiple times. Because I know that can get expensive if and different things come up in people's minds. But I know with my experience, I wanted to know what I wanted to do and be sure about it. And then I went to Kansas State in fall of 2015 and did 2.5 years there. Graduated winter of 2017, December of 17. And I wanted to stay in journalism, and I majored in journalism and mass communications and minored in geography. So hopefully that geography knowledge will be helpful if that GPS technician thing comes about. If I decide to change career paths in my life. So
Sure. Like how did college go? Like you said you did it, but then you took some years off. But like going from having the IEP and your dad as the teacher, I mean, not your teacher, but and then
he was my teacher in freshman year of high school though.
Okay. But he's at least like around.
Oh yeah.
And then like transitioning from that to the college world, like I know that was a really big leap for me. So
actually I kind of took it pretty well, if I remember correctly. And of course it's been several years back now. It's been 10 years since I graduated. I can't believe it already. It was a fairly easy transition. I mean, there were some classmates of mine from high school that weren't a lot of my classes because this community college was only 20 minutes away from where I went to high school. They also had a satellite campus in the same town. And so I'd share classes, with them. And I met some new people, but I kind of felt it was largely a continuation of high school, if you will. It's kind of the same people I already knew. Really, when I got to university, that changed a lot. I mean, I met a lot of different people from either across the state of Kansas or just anywhere across the country. Even met a couple of people from outside of the U.S. That I became friends with, and K-State is really kind of where I kind of flourished, I guess, as a person. It kind of brought me out of my whatever remnants I had left of my shell, I guess, and just brought me out into and I wasn't the man or the guy that they wanted at every party or anything off campus or something, but I was pretty well respected, and people that they like me. I think hopefully I'm not getting too ahead of myself here, if you will, but it just I felt honestly like my university years, I feel that they were honestly the better years compared to public school. And I'm not saying that public school was a horrible time for me, but I felt like the university years were better for some reason. I think just because of the different backgrounds, the different people you meet, from professors to students, the guidance and everything. I had more guidance there at Kansas State, I feel, but it was a fairly easy transition when I got back into school. After those 2 years off, I just kind of, I need to buckle down and study and pass my classes at least. So,
Sure. So were you living at home during college?
I lived at home. My first year of community college, because I would drive literally an hour to the main campus at college to go take courses, but some would be a lot closer, the satellite campus. And then my second year, I moved to Hutchinson, Kansas, where it was. I went to Hutchinson Community College there. For those who are familiar with it, with Kansas, lived at a house just a few blocks off of campus, rented a room actually from a friend of my mother's. She at that time, she was actually going through nursing school, getting her nursing degree. So she had a friend of hers from class, and she asked her if she had a spare room what if we allowed Alex to stay there, and we agreed to it. It was kind of an up and down experience, but it taught me a lot. So, and it was only a few blocks away from where I got a job at a hardware store just a few blocks away, and also at the radio station that kind of really got me into my journalism / media career.
Yeah. So now we can actually get to that. Like, you want to talk about your career path?
That's, oh my gosh, a couple different paths here. So I mentioned earlier about my love of geography and maps and stuff. So when I was 7, my dad gave me some atlases and stuff, and I would literally open a map of, I don't know, the US or Canada or something, and I would just stare at it, just memorizing town names and highways and stuff like that, and lakes, place names, all that, absorbed all that in. And I thought that maybe a cartographer, would be maybe something I'd like to do. That kind of changed over time, naturally, because technology happened. But then also I had a cousin that was married into the family when I was 11 or 12 years old. He just graduated from KU, and he was working for Kansas Public Radio. He was also majored in journalism. So he gave me a disc of an interview he did with Lynette Woodward, who is a very famous basketball player. I believe she also played for the WNBA too. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, he gave me that, and I listened to it, and I was really impressed with his interviewing skills and the story that he put together. And that kind of kickstarted me another path to get into journalism. The radio side, it really came from me just listening to music. With me growing up 20 miles from where I went to school, I didn't really have a lot of friends coming out to the country. I mean, if you were to come out to the country, it's not like, oh, you can stop over for a few hours. No, you're kind of out there for the whole weekend, and then you can go back into town. And this is well before I had a car. And so a lot of weekends, I would just spend my weekends just sitting on my bed, turning on the radio and listening to music and listening to how the DJ interacted with the audience. And I thought, maybe I could do something like this. And I later turned that into a career of mine. I did for 5 years. I did radio for 5 years before I got into TV, and the journalism thing, I always had it in the back of my mind. I guess I didn't really take that leap forward with it until probably my senior year. So I did an internship up in Toronto for a summer at an all news radio station called 680 News, owned and operated by Rogers, which owns the Toronto Blue Jays and the stadium they play in, the Rogers Center. And I've had some connections with Canadian personalities because I would listen to Canadian radio and pay attention to Canadian television and Canadian news and stuff. And I don't know how it happened, but I convinced the internship coordinator, newsroom coordinator, to be able to let me join. I was actually their first American intern they've ever had. So, and they've had American employees work there, but a lot of the times, it's Canadians that work there. And I learned a lot just over the course of 2 months. Lived downtown. That was probably one of the happiest moments of my life when I got the call, like, hey, you're accepted. When can you come up? Well, I'll pack a bunch of clothes and a couple of suitcases for 2 months and fly up there. So, and it worked out. It was a really good experience, and I was able to translate that into some more work I did at the radio stations in Manhattan, because I worked in commercial radio. I used to be a board operator for Kansas State Sports on weekends, just to make sure the commercials played in order, make sure you don't miss your legal IDs, or the FCC would come down hard on you or something. Also would run board for remotes, like if someone were to broadcast live from an event. But I also did my own show on our pop station that we owned. I did an overnight show for about a year. Then I was moved off to the country station, did weekends, overnights. It was all pre-recorded. Voice tracked is the name of the term, the technical term that in radio. It's pre-recorded days ahead of time. You just throw it into between songs, and that's how a lot of radio is nowadays. But that's a different topic for a different day. I've got a lot of thoughts on that, but I figured, and I knew that I saw that radio was changing well before I jumped into television, and I decided, after 5 years, I wanted to do something different. And I've always thought, TV would work well for me too. I did some stuff on our on-campus TV station as well, producing, anchoring newscasts, reporting, learning the technical side and really the whole ins and outs of how a TV newscast was put together. And it really ramped up after I got back from Canada. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to jump into TV and see how this goes. And 3 years later, here I am.
I just got like 8 questions I want to ask. So let's just start with like, how has autism impacted your work? Like, has it created challenges?
It has. And I did a bunch of different jobs before I got into radio and television. I worked at the hardware store I mentioned. That was pretty easy because I was just a cashier, but there are some social interactions with some customers. I guess I couldn't quite decipher. Yeah.
I was a cashier too for a little bit.
Well, you're trying to sell this Craftsman toolbox to somebody, and it's like, well, how can you say that? How can you make eye contact? Because for a long time, I couldn't make eye contact with anybody. I mean, looking at you right now, I would just otherwise I'd just be looking all over the place or staring out the window or something constantly. But thanks to some therapy and some public speaking courses I took on the community college level, that helped quite a bit. So that helped kind of fix that problem. But I worked at a pharmaceutical factory for a year. We made a lot of like morphine and injectable type drugs. It was not a good situation there. It was kind of during, I guess, kind of a dark time because it was those years in between I went to school. I was really depressed because I couldn't really get along with any of or not too many of the workers there. Had a bully there too, and she did it. It wasn't just targeting me; it was targeting other people, and it got to HR. And she didn't get fired. I didn't leave, but it was just a whole mess and everything. But it was not a good time. And I went to a couple therapists during that time. I've been kind of fighting some depression as well. And it got to the point where it was to the point where I just wanted to end my life, and it was not good at all. And fortunately, again, thanks to some therapy, family intervention, and just being around different people, getting different friends in my life, that helped me a lot. And I haven't felt that way in years. And I kind of take that experience from, hey, life is worth living. You don't need to end your life over, just because you're being beaten down by a bully, verbally. There's so many better people out there in the world, and God has a path for you and everything. And he wants you living. He doesn't want you to end your life. But then I went, so after that factory experience, I went to a warehouse position at an oil refinery we had in my hometown. Didn't last long. There are so many things I was confused about, trying to find certain things. It just wasn't my skill set. So I jumped to another factory job working for like a plumbing parts manufacturer. That was okay. I got along better with some people there, but just wasn't happy. But then, it's interesting. I got into radio, and I know that I didn't relate to everybody that worked there, but I got along fairly well with those there, and I was able to just memorize how to run a board. What this button does, what this slider does, what this, if I hit the, can't, hot mic moment, you can't say anything bad on even if it's off. And I just kind of took that ability I have to kind of just memorize things and kind of have that photographic memory. I always pride myself on that, and how to carry that into my work and into everyday life. And that's how I do it in television too. How this camera, on a camera, how this button works. How close do you have the mic to your interviewee? How to edit things. It's just all that knowledge I absorb in because of that photographic memory, and kind of use it, to work in everyday life.
Yeah. And I do want to clarify just for the audience, I know but not all autistic people have photographic memory. But I mean, for obviously those that do, that's can be a really great strength for them. So, I mean, I feel like I do not have photographic memory. I have a good memory, but nothing like you'd see in the savant level. So let's talk about like, it's interesting with journalism, like people on the spectrum, I think pretty widely have a very high level of curiosity about stuff. but there's also the social skills issue. So it's like you'd think that might not be the best match, but I know for myself, like in college and life, and like I've worked as a personal trainer too, and I feel like I've had, even when I was struggling with social skills, I feel like I had more success with conversations when there was like a purpose to them. Like when I was talking to a client about, like, this is what we're going to be doing for training, or, like whatever, like there's a focus, as opposed to like go up to somebody in a bar and start making small talk and whatever. So what are your thoughts on that kind of, like the mismatch potentially?
Well, and that was something, because when I told my parents that I wanted to maybe be a reporter, because I saw the people on television I saw growing up, I was like, man, I could do that too, possibly. They were really concerned because yes, journalism, you have to have a lot of social skills with it, and I wasn't that good at them for a long time, and it honestly took a lot of hard work. I've been to some conferences with some different autism specialty doctors and everything. I actually have a book from a guy from, I think it was New Zealand or Australia, and I forgot. If I had the book in front of me, I'd know his name, and maybe you might know his name. I think it's like Tony or Dr. Tony something or another. So he went to Kansas City I went to Kansas City for a training session of his, but it's been years ago. But anyway, I think just that practice, practicing with different friends, family members in particular, it's not like they're going to hate you if you say something bad. Now, their opinion of you may change, but they understand where you're coming from, because you're trying to learn. You're trying to fit in with the world and the intricacies behind it that are still a mystery to a lot of us. And but yeah, practice, I guess, really helped with that, and I was able to harness that, what I learned in that practice and everything, and really that's how I kind of made it work. Made it my own style, and that I guess I kind of credit that for my success being a journalist.
Yeah, well, and it makes sense that as a journalist, radio, TV, newspaper, whatever, because I worked at a newspaper for 2 years too. So I did have a thought that could actually be another episode that you and I do, is just talking about the differences, radio, TV, newspaper. But
oh, I've got stories. I've got stories. I've got
its own rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's yeah.
So let's see, where was I going? Oh, but I was going to say, like, in journalism, you mentioned the word practice. Like, if you're having to talk to people like multiple times a day, every day, like that's going to get you good fast, instead of like, I read 8 books and now I need to go once a week to try to do the thing, to have a nice conversation or whatever.
And I have a habit of talking to myself. I've had this habit for long time, since I was a little kid, and like I mentioned earlier, and I guess it's kind of a calming mechanism after a long day, or maybe you're trying to get a thought out, or how you're trying to practice yourself. How would you say this out loud to a person? How would you ask this question? Mm-hmm. And again, and I know people may look at me a little funny. It's like, what's wrong with him? But again, it's like, I feel it's a calming mechanism personally, and there may be others on the spectrum that it might find that as a comforting thing too. Because I don't mean to babble on too much, I guess, but yeah, talking to myself, it kind of helped me kind of practice, with vocal range, tone, that kind of thing too, how to present myself. And honestly, just kind of watching other people on television or listening on radio and how they do it. It's not I'm trying to mimic someone's style intentionally, but I guess trying to learn how they do it and kind of make it my own, if you will. Pick up on some bits of what they do, how they project their voice and everything, and how to, not scream at someone when you're trying to ask them a question, or scream at someone when you're live on TV. That's how it's helped me.
Yeah. How do you go about like finding the stories you get to cover? Because like there's a mix of stuff that's interesting to you, but you also have to balance what's interesting to the viewers and what the big stories of the day are.
And that can be kind of a challenge, because what you might find passionate to yourself may not, the viewers may not feel the same way. So you have to have that balance. I look through a variety of sources, see how this other station in Des Moines looked at, this bill that just passed, or newspapers. We have a kind of an aggregator website called CrowdTangle that we use. It scours Facebook, Twitter posts, website posts from different things, from schools, law enforcement, the city of whatever it is. And we just kind of combine that together, and you try to think of something that, it would relate to your target audience, which I know our target audience is a female, I believe in her late 30s. She has a couple of kids. I believe she's career focused. It's been a while since I've been told exactly how this works. Although we have a sheet upstairs actually that says that right as you walk out the door. But you have to find something that she can relate to, that she would drop everything, drop her phone call, drop her son, not literally, figuratively, and pay attention and listen. And sometimes for me, because I've done it long enough now, I think it's become fairly easy to do. There are some days where it's hard to try to do a story that maybe you should be interested in, and then you have to switch gears and do something else. But at first, when I was doing MOS and trying to get to know people, because this was my first job ever outside of Kansas, outside my home state. This is a whole new element for me. Trying to come up to people and say, "Hey, I'm Alex Jirgens from this TV station. What are your, I'm looking to do a story. What are your thoughts about it? Do you mind if I ask you some questions?" There were a lot of rejected people that I had for the first probably year or so. And even my boss told me initially, in your first year, you're going to suck because you're learning a lot. You're trying to do something new here. And then it got easier and better as time progressed. And there's still some awkward moments. You're trying you're at a coffee shop or something, and you're trying to get someone's view about a particular topic. And sometimes you feel that rejection. It's like, gosh, what did I do? Did I approach them weird? Do I smell bad or something? I mean, you have this not anxiety, but it's just kind of have this worry in your head. Is like, what did I do? I have to get this done. I have a deadline I have to meet. But sometimes it's sheer luck for me. Sometimes trying to find certain people and some. And I've told this story before to other people that may not feel comfortable being on television because they've been on it once and they felt embarrassed or what have you. And I keep saying, I've interviewed people that were dressed in nothing but their PJs. And I'm not kidding. If I can find the story that I interviewed that person with, I would totally dig it up. I guess to make them feel better, to make them feel comfortable. I've interviewed people in their PJs. Trust me, they turn to my best interviews I've ever had. And to that end, most people agree to well, I'll go ahead and talk to you. So it's a different way, but
you're talking about like people sometimes are like, "Oh, I'm having a bad hair day," or they're just that self-consciousness.
Yes, the self-consciousness. Yes. That, I don't like how my voice sounds. No, we want to hear what you have to say, because everyone has a story. I have a story. You have a story. Your audience has stories. I feel it's important that you should share your story, because maybe someone, like you hear about these stories about, suicide and everything too, or suicide attempts. And some may not feel exactly comfortable at that moment to talk about it, but you also got to try to show that, hey, I understand where you're coming from. But maybe someone, if you share your story, maybe someone else watching TV, maybe they would know someone in their lives that may be looking to take their life. If you share your story, maybe this might provide them some hope to get out of a despairing type of situation. And because people can usually relate to one another, there's a lot of similarities between average folks.
Yeah, and that's important, because it adds that, like, suicide being a personal thing that somebody's going through, or feeling suicidal, I should say, but as opposed to like a statistical approach where it's like, 83,000 people committed suicide in the last quarter of the fall. It's like that doesn't resonate with anybody. So
right.
Yeah, so it's like that person talking to you and getting their story out there could make the difference for somebody. And that's special, and that's something real and, you know, worth doing and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about another potential challenge for, I mean, you touched on it a little bit with, you were from Kansas, but you came to southeast Minnesota / North Iowa. And
Mm-hmm.
so let's talk about the challenges with like networking and that could be like on the job or for a job.
Networking. Well, in radio, actually, I did a lot of networking, and that's how I got to know people up in Toronto eventually. And it was pretty easy, I guess, because you have this common thing you're doing. You're a DJ. You're playing music. You're a radio personality, so people can relate to that. Been to some conventions before where I've met people from people I've listened to. Growing up as a kid, I watched you on TV, and I just networked them that way. And it's just because I told them maybe it's just. You're trying not to sound like a stalker when you're trying to talk to these people. It's like, yeah, I used to watch you on TV. I miss seeing you, because maybe they've retired by then or something. But in television, it's a little bit different, not too much. I've networked with some people, that used to work at our station. They've gone on to markets like Green Bay, Omaha, down to Alabama, down to different places. And so I've been trying to kind of network some of their people that they've worked with too, because working in journalism is like a brotherhood and a sisterhood. It's like one big, I wouldn't say fraternity, but it's like a society. It's like a society of its own. We're all doing one common thing, and that's to report the news, report the facts, and tell people stories. And it doesn't matter if you're on the West Coast or on the East Coast or flyover country here in Iowa. It's we all do the same thing every day, and some days we get an enjoyment out of it, others maybe not so much. but yeah, it's been fairly easy to network with people, and I've showed examples of my stories to other people outside of the station. They're really impressed with what I've done, and most can't tell that I have autism. It surprises them. I know it surprised our bosses actually when I told them. I think it was on the first or second day or something. Yeah, just to let you know, I have autism. So if I'm awkward or something around you, don't take it personally. It's just how I act. And well, I never would have thought that you would have had it. And I get that reaction a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm not offended by it at all. I mean, because I guess. When I think, and Alex, you can probably comment on this too. I feel like when people talk about autism, they think Down syndrome. They think of the low functioning, more severe, lower functioning end of the spectrum, where it's borderline Down syndrome. I'm on the high functioning end, and I didn't have a lot of people at my schools, at my school I went to, public school, that had high functioning autism. They were all low functioning, and for me, it was kind of hard to relate to them, right? Because they had a different experience than I do. So
yeah, and that's like, I don't know if you're aware, but I made a documentary about I called it Aspergers. That was like the year it came out too, with the DSM-5, where they folded that into high functioning autism. But
okay,
Aspergers the movie, so that's just on YouTube for free, and that was my senior project for college. And the point of that was to explain autism, and it's focused on more of the high functioning end in an hour and a half, instead of you have to read God knows how many books to get an understanding. And then the other part is giving parents and people on the spectrum like hope that you can have a successful life where you've got a job, you've got good relationships, you're happy, you're a functional member of society. Because like you were talking about earlier with are you going to have to move into a group home? Like, are you going to be able to do anything? And it sounds bad, but it's like, I definitely understand what you're saying with like, it's hard to relate, and there's almost like I don't want to be lumped in and with the lower functioning end. And it sounds harsh, but it's like the invisible disability aspect for the higher functioning people, that's its own challenge. And it's not as obvious, like you're saying. It's like, I get the same thing. It's like, when I do bring it up, the phrase I hear a lot is, I wouldn't have known if you hadn't told me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the high functioning end, it seems like, that our type of group, we're kind of invisible because, I mean, you look normal or neurotypical, I guess is the word. You don't look like you have, like a facial deformity, because I think it's just people's first sight of you. They think, if you have a facial, so one of our coworkers just walking by here waving hi, facial deformities or something, that shows, that's an obvious sign. But yeah, for somebody like me, I mean, I don't have, I don't have
Not like a wheelchair
or
something, or you can
a wheelchair or have a like a walking issue or something like that. Yeah. And to those, and I've been trying to connect with more people on the lower functioning end of the spectrum as well. And I know they're going to have probably a harder challenge than I've had, but I believe there's hope out there for them too.
Let's pivot a little bit and kind of talk about relationships. So like, how has autism impacted your romantic life?
Well, not to delve into my entire dating history. I'm dating a woman right now. She's a native of Mason City, Iowa. Her name is Paige, and we've been together now for about 2.5 years. In past relationships, my Asperger's wasn't really much issue per se. It was just kind of it's just something you have. You're just you're my boyfriend. That's well, and with her. So, and I'm not trying to reveal any personal information for her, for her on my end of things. She has ADD, and it's kind of a balance really between my autism and her ADD, in the fact that we both have issues. We both are struggling with them to some extent, but we make it work. She has a lot of the same interests I do, which I think helps. Probably compared to some of my past relationships where we didn't really have much in terms of common interests. We had some, but it just wasn't a lot. We both like to travel. We both like to try different foods and stuff. And she understands, I think, because she's seen, because I've had meltdowns before. I've had meltdowns, growing up as a kid and everything. And to some extent, I still have them as an adult, but not out in public or anything like that. It's always, behind closed doors, if you will. But she understands, how a situation can be frustrating for me. And she works with it. She's like my therapist, if you will. Like, she'll try to calm me down. We'll talk through the problem and kind of work on a solution to it. And I feel that's helped our relationship, honestly.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit more about emotional regulation. Like, for me, I've done a lot of work on like personal development, and then I think also just martial arts has helped build me up a lot, both physically and like with emotional resilience. So I guess going from a 2-year-old where you're crying at your shoes are the wrong color or whatever, to adult level problems. What kind of stuff do you think has helped you with emotional regulation or resilience, that kind of stuff?
I think part of it is because I don't want to embarrass myself in front of, people. I guess if I have, some frustrations or something, I kind of, I guess, bottle them in, which is maybe not a good thing to do. But if you're out in public, and especially if you're, on company time and stuff, you don't want to have a meltdown or, anything like that. But I guess I don't know how to answer that question. I guess that was my way of answering it. I guess I don't know how else to answer it.
Sure. Be a man, shove them down. Men don't feel.
Yeah. Which, and for me, I'm an emotional type of guy. Not that I guess, cried every little thing that happens. I'm not like that, but I guess I have more empathy and care for people, probably because of my situations, growing up. You kind of feel for people, with their struggles. It's like, I mean, to some you can relate, others you can't. But again, everyone's got a tough road to hoe, if you will. And you want to be there, and you want to, you still have to take care of yourself and everything too, but you want to be there provide an emotional, lending hand or lending shoulder, I guess.
I've read and I think I agree with it, like people on the spectrum, like there's the people say that they're like not emotional and they're like robots or whatever, but the way I read it, and I think I agree with it, is it's more like people on the spectrum they have an exposed nerve, so they're like super sensitive and they have to like protect that because they feel so strongly with the empathy and stuff you're talking about.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, and even though I've been kind of, society kind of factors into this too. Society teaches men that, like you mentioned, bottle it up, hold it in. I guess, I mean, that's not a good thing, as studies have shown. I mean, not that you want to let out an explosive outburst to everybody you see. That's probably not the right thing to do. But show your emotions. I mean, I feel as a society, and I feel as human beings, we honestly should do that. It's healthy for us if you think about it. It's a lot healthier than bottling it in, and then it causes potential health issues down the road.
Mm-hmm. So I got 2 more questions. Are you like happy with journalism? Like, is that kind of what you want to keep doing, or is there other stuff you want to do?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm happy to answer it. I would still like to do journalism. I've been looking at recently at some other ways, and I think thanks to some stories I've recently covered, maybe potentially getting into PR work, or being not a spokesman necessarily, but being kind of a PR or marketing type person, maybe for like a type of firm that specializes in autism. I know there's one in Des Moines, and I'm trying to think of the name of it. I drive by it all the time when I go down there, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But there's others across the country and across Minnesota and Iowa both. Maybe something like that. Maybe doing something like that in a few years. And it's not to say that I'm giving up on journalism. There's different things that open different doors to you in your life. I mean, I know there's people here at the station that they never would have thought they would have gotten in this career, but they did, and they're doing a darn good job of it. Mm-hmm. And that may be something I'm kind of experiencing right now, and I credit journalism for kind of helping me get to this point, and definitely kind of opening my eyes to a different type of world, and also some of the interviewees I've interacted with over the years. Some of my stories, it's like I never gave thought to that before, but now I'm interested, and maybe it's something I could see myself doing potentially.
Yeah. And I know for myself, like I've definitely, since I did my documentary, I want to keep doing stuff for I just call it the autism cause. And it's like, I don't know specifically what that would be, but I mean, if it's a podcast here and there, or I don't know. Yeah, but it's, you just kind of keep going with stuff and see what opens up. So,
the universe has a plan for you.
Yeah.
You just have to be willing to listen and explore.
Yeah. And then my other last question is just with autism, like, do you have thoughts on the facet of people that want a cure?
I thought about this today, and I've thought about this many, many times. It would be interesting to see if they actually find a cure for autism in my lifetime. I'd be very impressed with it. Would I take this cure? I don't think I would. Years ago, I would have said yes, because I was at a point in my life where I just wanted to do anything to be normal. But now that I've become more open about autism and my struggles and my experience with it over the years, I don't feel I'd take it now. And I would leave that up to the person. That's your call if you want to take it or not, if they do discover one. But for me personally, I feel like I would lose a part of myself if I took the cure, because then I wouldn't be me anymore. I'd be someone totally different. And I don't know. I just wouldn't feel right with myself if I did.
Right. And I feel the same way, where it's like, and the way I put it in my documentary is the cure, like, I don't know if you really can have a cure. Bailey, stuff. So
gotta love it when animals disrupt your life or your Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
It's happened to me before when I worked at home. I had my cat walk right through the shot, and it's like, Maisie, go away.
Yeah.
Daddy's trying to work.
Yeah. So the way I put it is like, autism is like, it's the way your brain is wired. So you're not going to necessarily like cure it, but what you can do is work to overcome the negative aspects, like if it's sensory sensitivity or whatever other issues you have. I just say sensory sensitivity because that's the thing for me. And like, for example, we've got the police scanner at work that I just
it kind of grates on your nerves a little bit when you're trying to hyper focus on something.
Or if there's a dog
or yeah, jolts you out of nowhere. It's that's still on. I thought we'd somehow turn that off on accident.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know, like but yeah, I have heard people, and I think I know earlier in life, like I'll say junior high school or whatever, like I was wanting that, I just want to be normal, and I felt that, and then it I don't know if it was gradual or whatever, but it shifted to like just why, like who wants to be normal, and then there's also like what is normal, so
because that definition of normal is, it really depends on the person you ask, but it's changed over time. What's normal today may not be normal in 5 weeks. It may, or 5 months, 5 years, X amount of time, it may be something completely different.
Right.
And it's to keep up with, I feel it'd be hard to keep up with those normalizing trends, I guess, if you will.
Yeah. And I read recently in Jordan Peterson's new book, Beyond Order, he had a line that I really liked, and it's, sanity is understanding the rules, like the social rules of the world, and accepting them and integrating them. And it's really interesting because, with autism, it's sometimes called like wrong planet syndrome. And it's like, we don't inherently understand the social rules. Like we can learn them, but it takes that much conscious effort. So it's just interesting. It's like you kind of have to, on some level, blend in and play by society's rules, but those rules are arbitrary, just like a lot of rules. So it's just interesting, food for thought.
And I would be interested in checking out your documentary on YouTube. I'm glad you told me that. Now I've got some watching or reading material. See how old school I am? Video material to check out this weekend. Because tomorrow's Friday, so I've got some time this weekend. Yeah, I'll have to boot that up. So
yeah, well, my wife watched it the very night after our first date. So it's like,
I take it she was pretty impressed with it.
Yeah,
that's good.
Well, it's helped a lot of people. Like I still get emails and messages like, hey, this helps me, like I relate to this so much, or it helps me understand my son or whatever. And it's just
really... And how does that make you feel? I mean, knowing that you're trying to make a difference like that in people's lives. Yeah,
it definitely feels good. So like I was saying, I do want to keep doing stuff for the autism cause, but I don't know if it's another documentary or what, but I'll figure it out. So is there anything you want to point people to or plug?
I wish I had a book or a documentary of some kind myself, but
sure.
I don't have one yet. And I'm maybe looking at getting into some podcasting. I haven't figured out how I'm going to do this. I don't even have all the equipment to do it yet because I'm cheap. But one of these days, and it may be a project I'll do maybe this coming winter or the summer. I don't know, something. But maybe be on the lookout for that. Old Jirgens here might have something cooking up his sleeve here, or whatever the terminology is. See, I get my metaphors mixed up. It's for those listening, you probably know what I mean. So
well, and I mean, I'm on a computer and you're on a phone, so it's like it's nothing crazy. But anyway, so thanks for being on the show, and we'll have you guys tune in for the next one, and probably have Alex on for another chat soon.
I'd be happy to come back. Thank you for inviting me on, Alex. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Absolutely. Take care now.